Hello, everybody. I am actually not recording uh, any specific chapter. This is a recording I'm going to place a link for not only in your email, but I will place a link, a permanent link that's going to be in the research essay materials describing kind of what I'm asking you to do for the research essay. Now, there are going to be times when we will actually, I may change what view I'm showing. Right now, you should see the warfare Excel sheet. And I could choose any topic, so that's not the big deal. I could change it right now if I felt like it. I could look at, gender roles, or I could look at religion. What I would suggest you do, if you have not yet done so, please look at the assignment sheet, because essentially what I'm going to be asking you to do is, no matter what you choose, you need to be examining two different eras or two different cultures within what we've been discussing and what we are going to discuss. So you can actually go as late as about 1945, but what I want you to do is choose two very disparate cultures to compare. Choose a facet within humanities, and that can be anything. I have people who are doing things from, dentistry. Do something that you're really interested in. Certainly mythology. Several people are looking at different types of polytheism, or comparing one kind of polytheism to one kind of monotheism. Any of it is totally fair game. So the main thing, though, is that you don't compare two things that are right next to each other in time or right next to each other in geography. So, for instance, in this case, if I were to compare whether warfare or whatever, since I have the Roman Empire chosen, I would not want to pick, for instance, the Greeks, the ancient Greece. First of all, much of ancient Greece, if I could just write, it was taken over by the Roman Empire. So that already makes their cultures very similar. Plus, Roman Empire loved to imitate the Greeks. So I'd rather have a comparison that creates more contrast. And so try not to do that. Let's go ahead and I'll go back to what I was doing. And so what I want you to do, first of all, if you have not already given me your topic, is I want you to essentially figure out, go through the sheet, and I can actually, let me see if I can share something else. Yeah, I can share something else. And let me see if I can go to the correct web browser. Yeah, let me see if I can go to, actually, I'll go to Blackboard. And if you go into the classroom, go to lessons, then go down to the bottom of lessons, and then you have research essay materials, and then go to that assignment sheet, and it's downloading, and I can actually share. I'm not going to share it with you though, because you need to, well, I will share it, and I can actually start sharing that instead. Oh, it's showing all the grid lines. That's funny. Let's see, share. And I will share the Microsoft Word. Why it is showing grid lines, I have no earthly idea. So let's look at you and take off grid lines, because that's ridiculous. Okay, so if you're looking at the assignment and you haven't looked yet, look at the bold wording. You need to essentially choose a topic, something that is part of humanities, and then choose two periods, two eras of history, two places. It could be the Aztecs versus, so they can be disparate in geography, but two different eras that are not super connected. And they cannot be, one of the two eras cannot be now. We don't have the perspective to do that. So, but once you have those two things chosen, then I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Then you can share, you can actually create what I would like you to do. Please, please, please create this chart. Okay, so this is what I'm going to actually have you do, is create this chart, because if you do this, you're going to end up accomplishing a bunch of different things. One is that you are going to have it very clearly delineated what is it that you are comparing. Two, you're going to already have a pretty good organization, and I'll show you how to even modify the organization. But you have to have, and three, you're going to have a very good idea of what you don't know and what you need to go find research on. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go back to warfare. Or what would I like to compare? If I could really compare, what would I compare? Well, let's just look at the Italian Renaissance. Okay. Okay. So now I need to go in here, and I'm going to change my topic because I don't want to do religion, because it's the same. Roman Empire becomes the Holy Roman Empire. But if I look at the, let's look at art. And I'll put in parentheses, particularly sculpture, because the truth is we don't have a lot of Roman sculpture that survive. I mean, we don't have a lot of two-dimensional art from the Roman Empire, except for a lot of tiled mosaics and things like that. Very few paintings have survived. Okay, so if I look at that, if I decide, okay, art is what I'm going to be comparing, I have to have apples to apples. I have to compare one thing to another thing within the same thing. So if I were, for instance, comparing two dresses, deciding what I was going to go, maybe I had to go and do some function tonight, and I'm trying to compare my two outfits. I'd have to look at the jacket. I'd have to look at the dress. I'd have to look at the shoes. I'd have to look. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot of different things. How I do my hair. Well, the same thing, any comparison, you need to have elements that you are comparing between. And so that's what you need to put over in this first column. So the facets are the aspects of that particular, of what that topic is. So for instance, in a sculpture, looking at what materials. And I'll just make it, I'll just make this bigger. Ugh, oh, please stop. It's not letting me, like, not let it. Okay, I'll just put materials used. Okay. Now, once you put that in there, then I have to look at the two things, to the two areas, and go, okay, so in the Roman Empire, what were the typical materials used? And the typical materials were things like, obviously, they did use brass. I mean, not brass, bronze. But most of what they did in as far as sculpture was stone. And most of it, of course, was in marble. They really didn't do a lot of sculpting that was in, even though they had access to concrete, they didn't make anything out of concrete. So most of it was going to be in marble, or it could be, other things, jade, etc. Okay. And it may be that I put an asterisk here because I'm not sure all of what's there. So that's something for me to look up. I know that they made things out of marble, and I know they've made things out of bronze, and I know they made things out of marble and jade, but what else did they do? That's the question. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does. And then once you do that, then you have to go to the Italian Renaissance. Well, what did they make their stuff out of? Well, we know just from the two Davids, for instance, that they used bronze, because that's what the Botticelli, not Botticelli, I cannot remember the guy's name. One of the Ninja Turtles. That's what one David was made out of. The other David was made out of marble. So the David, or the Giant, by Michelangelo. Donatello, that's the other person. Donatello's David was made out of bronze, and Michelangelo's was made out of marble. So we know marble and bronze were both used. And the truth is Donatello made several statues out of bronze, and Michelangelo made many of them out of marble. Were there other things used as well? I'd have to look that up. And so that's what you can say. You can say, did they use jade? No, not typically. They didn't have big pieces like that. Did they use other stuff though? Yes, very possibly. And so I'll just put an asterisk that I have to look that up too. Okay. Then subject matter. What did they make sculptures of? And the truth is, in the Roman Empire, most of their sculptures were made of statesmen. Remember that the Greeks really liked to make sculptures of gods and goddesses and heroes, but they mostly made like realistic busts and full figures of statesmen who are fully clothed, or busts of their wives, or their, even death masks and things like that, but of real people. But then they also made copies of Greek statues, and those are usually gods, heroes, and I'll just put that like that. Okay, so in the Italian Renaissance, though, they didn't do the same thing. Did they make lots of statues of statesmen? No, but they made a few. Oh, and one thing too, that reminds me, the statue that was of the bust of Medici, Lorenzo Medici de Medici, was made of plaster, and so they made them out of cheaper materials, obviously, too. And so in this case, though, so there were a few people, and I'll just put Medici in here because he definitely had, and they also had biblical heroes, mostly biblical. In the Italian Renaissance, they really didn't do a lot of like Greek statues, but they did do some. So I'll just put gods, goddesses. Okay, so they did do some, but most of it was going to be, and I can even put this in bold if I want to. This mostly it's biblical heroes. Now, again, if you're not sure of something, what do? You put an asterisk there and you go, okay, I need to go find some more. But this is a chance for you to find out more. And this is a rough thing, but you just keep on doing it until you can fill out, and you can do this on paper, you can write it out by hand. Just make your chart where you have the facets listed on the left-hand side, and then you have the details about each empire in there. Now, of course, putting asterisks is great. Giving examples is great. So under each one of these, like I might put something, instead of making this a bigger, let me go into a different sheet because I can make it smaller. Instead of putting a bigger thing, I might put, an actual, maybe, okay, so for the Roman Empire, I might put bust of Caesar, because there was a bust of Caesar. I might put the statesman and his wife, that the duo that were placed together, the two busts. I might put some, but I'll put some other examples, and those will actually go with the topic and with my explanation. So you want to have, why are you doing that? It's making me do stupid things. So, okay, so we'll just put another little asterisk. Okay, so the bust of Caesar, Excel is sometimes not very excellent. But you want examples to illustrate whatever you're talking about. So here, what's an example of the Italian Renaissance? I would use the two Davids, just as an example. There's one of Moses that Michelangelo created, and then etc. So I can add any examples that I'm going to use to show who was being depicted. Okay, and then you have to think, okay, what's the next facet? What else do we need to talk about? And I can look at the tools used. And there may be a wide variety, or maybe they're the same. That is perfectly okay. But look at the tools, and maybe I don't know at this point, so I'm got to go, well, I got to go look that one up. So I can actually put an asterisk in there and just leave it because I don't know the answer. Or maybe I know, in the Italian Renaissance that the truth is neither one had any access to machinery. Like they couldn't just saw anything on marble or anything like that. Some, but the bronze stuff, they actually, would melt it into a form. And so, maybe I could use plaster or something like that. But the truth is the techniques would be the same. Melted bronze. But you still had to sculpt it. And then, the same thing would exist. And literally, I could even take this and put copy, and I could put it over here because it's the same thing. The same method was being used. But then I could look, are there different tools? And those tools have to be, figured out as well. So I'm just going to keep on going, and I could even list out the tools down below this tools used and add and add and add and add and do that comparison. Are there tools that the Roman Empire used that the Italian Renaissance didn't, or that they modified? Because those have to be done as well. So that's what you're essentially, figuring out is, is there something that is comparative? It may be that they're all exactly the same, and their methods of creating these things have not changed literally in 1,000 years. And the Renaissance in Italy, which is happening 1,000 years after the Roman Empire, is still pretty much, or a little more. The methods have not changed at all. Maybe they're going back to those classical forms and they're trying to emulate them. And so then, then we can look at also, purpose. Why were these things made? And that can include, where are they? So obviously in the first purpose, they were made, in the Roman Empire, these statues were public. And so that would mean they were out in real life. They were out in squares. They were viewed by the public. But why? What were they for? And they could be for the worship of gods, kind of the way the Greeks did it, where they had the god. But remember, Romans weren't super religious. And so a lot of it is just going to be display in private homes. Because remember, these statesmen would have made, statues of themselves, almost like self-portraits that we put up on our wall or above our mantle or something like that. Though I think that's pretty vain. But these people were super rich. They might have been memorials that were placed either within the home or placed outside near a person's grave. So I can even put grave stones. Or something like that. They could also have been memorials, like war memorials, that were more in public view. So then I go over here and I say, okay, so the Italian Renaissance, most of these were public as well. Now there were some that were made for private individuals, okay, and that can even say that, the vast majority were in public places, but many were made for private individuals. But a lot of those private individuals still place these things publicly. And so that's one thing to remember, is just because it doesn't fit into the norm doesn't mean, or it's not inside a church, doesn't mean it's not in a public square or even on display in someone's front yard, or front courtyard, so that people in public who are just walking by can't see it. And so then I would put something like, I'd say, well, public, it was for worship in churches. And so who are the figures? Biblical. In fact, this is where we began to have, and I can add this over here. This includes saints and prophets, Jesus, Mary, etc. Okay, so that's an addition that was not very typical within the Roman Empire. Remember, they're not very religious. So in churches, obviously, the figures that are going to be up there, the sculptures that are going to be within the churches during the Italian Renaissance, are going to be biblical in nature. They're going to be saints and prophets, Jesus and Mary, all that kind of stuff. And then they're also going to be public, so public. Public courtyards. They're going to be private homes. And that can be inside or outside. Now, some materials, obviously, if it's plaster, there's nothing you can do. But the outside, of course, has to be, they'd have to be made of stone or bronze or something like that. But they can also be, could they be memorials? Yes. So, the truth is all of that could be involved, but there is some overlap. And yet, obviously, we're talking about the difference between Roman Empire, when they would have been polytheistic and would have had all of the gods and heroes and everything. And then the Italian Renaissance, when everything is very much under the auspices of the Holy Roman Catholic Church still. Remember, the Protestantism doesn't happen until and it happens in the north. Italy actually remains Catholic throughout up until the present. The vast majority of churches in Italy are still Catholic. There are some Protestant churches in there, but the vast majority of them are still Catholic. And most people in Italy are Catholic. So I have all of these elements. Now I could keep on going, and feel free. You can have 8 or 9 different facets. So don't think, you could even look at some of the major artists if you want to, or you could look at training, or or inspiration, or rules, or there's I'm just going to list a whole bunch of things that and we don't know a lot of the Roman artists, and so we can even say, on the Roman artists, we don't know, anonymous, or they could have even been or multiple working on the same thing. But then with the Renaissance, there's careful training and mentoring. And then who are some of the typical ones? Michelangelo, Donatello. Gentileschi. No, not Gentileschi. That's the wrong period. The two other artists, who are they? Oh my goodness, I can't remember names. But the two that ended up fighting over who was going to carve the doors for the church. But you can list all of those here. I'll just put etc. Okay, so and looked at who taught whom, how did they learn, where did they live, and I can even say where were was there a typical training, and maybe I don't know, and I'm going to put that here because I don't know with the Romans. I don't know what I don't know. So continue to put all those things. Once you have all of them figured out, then you can literally, then your goal is to decide, okay, which one's first? What's the most important stuff we need first? So maybe I would want, this might be number 1, the materials that they used. And number 2 is the tools, the actual craft. And maybe number 3 is the artists. So I'm deciding which one, what order all of these different things we're going to go into. Okay. And then after that, I may go into subject matter. So that's 4, and then purpose. Okay. And then if you're thinking, okay, now I'm confused because they're all in a different order, we'll just cut and paste them. Literally, you can move like this whole section and delete it and move it there. And then you can move 5 and take it out and move it there. And so now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all put together. And I'll just take out the rules. Now, is that exhaustive? No, I barely started. But this gives you a really good example of what you might be able to do. So this is just one subject. You can do this with any certain thing. If you want to send me by the end of this week or sometime next week, if you want to send me your chart, I can help you with it. I will look over those charts. Just email it to me so that I can see that you're on the right track and you're actually doing the comparison. But then once you're done with this and you've not only written out all the facets you're going to use, and then I can tell you if you're missing, if there's a facet you need to cover too, that would be helpful. But then you have to actually figure out, okay, what do I need research on? Now you get to go to all those asterisks and think, okay, I need to look at my chapter, but then I need to go and find resources as well. And where you can find the resources are, you have several options. I'm going to give you some easy ones. Obviously, you can do a web search and just search Roman Empire sculpture or something like that. You can see pictures. You can find articles that talk about how sculptures were made and what they did and what they were of and stuff like that. Be really cautious. The likelihood of you're ever finding a really good article that's comparing these two things, Roman Empire sculpture versus Italian Renaissance sculpture, is completely bogus. You are not, just search one at a time. Okay. And for the first paper, what the first paper is going to ask you to do, so part one, which is due after we come back from the break, from the July 4th break, in this case, or after we come, you look at your syllabus, if this is a later semester, and look for, when is the due date for paper number one. Paper number one is only the introduction, where you're essentially telling me what's your main topic, which is right here, right? So I am using sculpture, and then the first era. So your first paper is essentially half of your paper, and you're going to do your best to get all the research you can in the next couple of weeks so that you can fill out the Roman Empire side of this art paper. Okay. Then, and you have an introduction that says, I'm going to be comparing these two eras, and this is what I think I'm going to find when I compare the two. This is how they're going to contrast with each other and what we're going to learn from this comparison contrast. Okay, then you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the facets in the order you want to in the Roman Empire. And that's the first half of your paper. So write them out, use your research, cite sources within the essay, and then put the full citations at the end. You can absolutely send me copies of it and say, am I are my work cited right or whatever, and I will give you feedback back. So I'll try to check my email quite a bit, even though I won't be at school the next 2 weeks. Okay, because I actually am going to be out of the country. But I will give you feedback and say, okay, yeah, that looks like it's on the right path, or you forgot about this facet, or this doesn't really get explained, or did you cite the source or stuff. I give you feedback. But I'm going to be kind of easy on the grading for the first paper because I know you haven't actually submitted all this stuff to me before. I'm going to give you a lot of feedback and grade that first paper, and then you'll have a few weeks after that to turn in the second half, or both parts together, really. You're going to have an intro that's still going to cover those two eras, then you have that first era revised, and then the second era written out. And then you have concluding paragraphs that kind of show the comparison and tell us what we need, what we can interpret. What does this comparison show about the culture at the time, about the people and why they wanted art the way that they wanted it, about the artists? How much has changed within all those centuries? And it may be a lot, and it may be not much. What's really influencing the subject matter? Anything that you can interpret from this comparison to make it meaningful. That's what's at the end of the paper. And then you turn it in with your works cited page. And so first half is due, in a few weeks. I will look at it and give you lots of feedback. And then you go ahead and finish researching. You have to have 2 sources for the first paper, for the first half, and then 4 sources total by the time you turn it in. Can you have more? Yep. But don't have less, because you'll lose points that way. But there is an actual rubric for both papers, both part 1 and part 2, on the research essay materials. So be sure and look at that too. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have questions after going through this video, email me through course mail and ask. If you know your subject matter and you have one era, but you're not sure about the other one, write me and I will help you find a second era that will compare well, okay? No matter what your topic is. So just email me. If you haven't already filled out your topics and your topic proposal, you need to do so now. And you need to send it to me so I can know that you're on the right track. And I can cut you off at the pass if you're not. But then once you do that, feel free to make a chart just like this one, or better, because using Excel is not fun, but it's not good in Word either. But then feel free to make that chart and send it to me and say, am I on the right track? And then once you do that, and I'm going to go ahead and share something else. One more thing. I'm going to go ahead and share Google Chrome. And we're going to find a new place, and this is going to be so much fun. But you're actually going to go somewhere weird. I said you could actually search for things online, right? And look up web articles. You can also use, you cannot use it to cite, but you can use Wikipedia, and I'll show you how. This is not for the faint of heart, but this is what you need to do. So let's go, if we go to Wikipedia, and we're going to search something. Say we're looking up Roman Empire sculpture. Okay. Say that, well, that's what we decide to look it up. And let's do a search there. And so when I do that, oh, here's Roman sculpture right there. See? Okay. So then I have this article, right? Now, can I use this article? No. Do not for 1 second think that it is okay to use this. Okay. Wow, they have all sorts of different sculptures that just pop up. So you get all these examples to use, you know, for they have Greek sculpture, of course, which is different. But if you're looking at all this, you're thinking, ooh, I can use this. No, you cannot. This is not a source that is reputable because anyone can change it. However, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, first of all, look at all of that. Fantastic pictures you can use if you want to. But you can scroll down all the way to the absolute bottom of the article, and you're going to find notes. These are all the citations for all of the stuff that's up top. And a lot of these sources are online and in full text. So if I want to go and access something else, I can actually go and use the link to go to the full text article. And I even have a lot of the information right there from my citation. But if you want to know, I would go ahead and look, oh, hey, I want to use this, like this Hennig guy is all over the place. So we got to find who Hennig is. And maybe it's, you know, maybe it's the Smithsonian Magazine. Can you cite Smithsonian? Yes. Can you cite the Memoirs of the American Academy in Rome? Yes, that's actually in JSTOR. It is a very reputable article. And so you can't use Wikipedia and cite Wikipedia, but you can absolutely use a lot of these sources. And the references list is huge. In further reading, a lot of those things you can find too. And then there are some external links so that you can find the Gallery of Ancient Art Roman Sculpture. These are all going to be reputable resources. Do you see what I mean? And so that's, and if there are further things like you're not sure exactly how to cite this or how to look it up, maybe you want to do pottery, look up pottery, and then you can look up all of that stuff too. But you can't use the article for Wikipedia. Don't cite it because you'll get dinged for that. That's not reputable for a research essay. But this stuff is. Colossal Statues of Mars Ultor, also go ahead and read it. And if it works, use it and cite it. Okay? If you have any questions about how to cite sources or what you need to do with that, let me know, but I'm going to record another video that's going to talk about paper format. So hopefully that will help you as well. Thanks, you guys.